Most people don't think of themselves as broke because of something they're doing. They think of it as something that's happening to them. A slow economy, bad timing, not enough income yet, not the right opportunity. But that's not usually how it works. In most cases, staying broke isn't a condition. It's a pattern, a set of ordinary behaviors running quietly in the background, draining resources, blocking progress, and creating a life that looks fine on the surface but has very little underneath it. And the reason these behaviors are so dangerous is that none of them feel like mistakes. They feel completely normal. They feel like what everyone around you is doing. And in most cases, that's exactly right. So in this video, we're going to name them clearly, all 7, because once you can see them for what they are, they stop being invisible. Most spending decisions are not really about money. They're about belonging. When the people around you eat at certain restaurants, drive certain cars, and take certain trips, a quiet pressure builds. Not because anyone is forcing anything, but because the brain reads the environment and tries to match it. Falling behind the social standard feels like falling behind in general. This is how people end up spending money they don't have to maintain a life they can't actually afford. Not out of greed, out of the very human need to feel like they fit. The problem is that fitting in is expensive. And when the room you're trying to match is operating at a level above your means, every attempt to keep up quietly chips away at your financial foundation. The people who build wealth are not immune to social pressure. They're just more honest about where it's coming from. They understand that the spending isn't about the thing being purchased. It's about the signal it sends. And once you see that clearly, you can start making real decisions instead of reactive ones. There is active income and there is passive income. Most people know the difference on paper. Almost nobody applies it in practice. Active income is money that stops arriving the moment you stop working. It requires your time, your presence, your continued effort. It is the most common form of income and the most fragile, because if anything disrupts your ability to show up and perform, the money stops. Passive income, by contrast, keeps moving without you. It comes from assets, from ownership, from systems that generate returns independent of your daily participation. The broke pattern is this: earn active income, spend active income, repeat. No money ever gets redirected towards something that grows. No assets ever get built. The entire financial life runs on a hamster wheel that looks productive and goes nowhere. Wealthy people don't earn more in most cases. They route their money differently. A portion always finds its way into something that works on their behalf. Over time, that portion compounds, and eventually, the assets begin generating more than the work ever did. The behavior that keeps people broke is spending every dollar that arrives. The behavior that changes everything is building a second column. When life feels out of control, spending feels like control. That is not a metaphor. It is a real psychological response. A hard week at work, a strained relationship, a general sense that things aren't going anywhere. The brain searches for relief, and it finds something it can do right now, something that produces an immediate result. A purchase, a small hit of agency in the middle of uncertainty. This works. In the very short term, it genuinely works. The emotion gets quieter, the discomfort lifts, and then the credit card bill arrives and a new discomfort takes its place. This cycle is not a character flaw. It is a deeply human response to stress. But it becomes expensive very quickly, because the underlying problem is never actually solved by the purchase. The stress returns, the spending follows, and each cycle leaves the financial position slightly worse than it was before. The way out is not willpower. It is awareness, knowing the trigger before it pulls, recognizing the emotional state before it becomes a financial transaction. That gap between feeling something and acting on it is where the pattern can finally be broken. The market is full of capable people who are reliable, hardworking, pleasant to be around, and reasonably skilled at a broad range of things. Those people do not get paid very much, not because they aren't good, but but because what they offer is easy to find. When something is easy to find, the price for it stays low. That is not a moral judgment. It is just how supply and demand actually works. The people who earn significantly more are not always more talented in a general sense. They are more specific. They have gone deep on something that fewer people have stuck with long enough to understand. They have built a combination of knowledge and experience and context that is genuinely harder to replicate. A broke pattern looks like this. Learn a little about many things, stay flexible, be helpful everywhere, and hope the general usefulness gets rewarded. It doesn't. Not at the level most people want. A wealthy pattern looks like this. Identify where depth creates real value, go further in that direction and feels comfortable, and let the specificity do the work. Depth is what the market pays a premium for. General competence is what it pays to get by. This is one of the most successful features of the modern financial system, and it was not designed with your wealth in mind. Monthly payment thinking takes large, sobering numbers and breaks them into small, manageable ones. A $40,000 car becomes $600 a month. A $2,000 couch becomes $80 a month for 2 years. The subscription gets framed as less than $3 a day. At that level of framing, almost anything seems reasonable. And that is the entire point, because the companies offering these arrangements are not simplifying the decision. They are obscuring the real cost. They are replacing the full picture with a cropped version that is much easier to say yes to. When you add up the monthly payments across a household, the total annual commitment is frequently staggering. But because each individual payment feels modest, the total never really registers. And so the money flows out quietly, consistently, every single month, toward things that are already owned by someone else. Wealthy people think in totals. They ask the full question, not what does this cost per month, but what does this cost entirely, and what is the return on that? That shift in framing changes most decisions entirely. Busy is comfortable. Busy feels like progress. There's genuine psychological satisfaction in having a full calendar, a long task list, and constant momentum. But financial progress is not measured in activity. It is measured in outcomes. A person can work extremely hard for an entire decade, stay perpetually occupied, and arrive on the other side with nothing meaningfully built, because the activity was not pointed toward anything that compounds. It was pointed toward maintenance, toward keeping the current situation running, not toward building something beyond it. Real financial progress requires a different kind of attention. It requires stepping back from the motion and asking uncomfortable questions. What is actually growing here? What does this look like in 5 years? Am I building or just running? Those questions are easy to avoid when the calendar stays full. And staying busy is a very effective way to never have to ask them. The people who change their financial situation are usually not the hardest working in the room. They are the most deliberate. They know the difference between effort and direction, and they are honest enough with themselves to recognize when one is present without the other. This is the most expensive behavior on the list, because it doesn't feel like a behavior at all. It feels like prudence, like patience, like the kind of measured thinking that separates smart people from reckless ones. I'll start investing when the market is more stable. I'll build the emergency fund once things calm down. I'll get serious about money once I'm earning more. The timing just isn't right yet. That's not caution. That's a story being told to make an action feel responsible. The right moment does not exist as a fixed point waiting to be reached. Conditions will never be perfectly clean. There will always be uncertainty, risk, a reason to wait one more quarter. The market will always feel either too high or too volatile. Life will always have something demanding attention. And meanwhile, compounding doesn't pause. It runs constantly, rewarding the people who started earlier and quietly penalizing the ones who waited for certainty that never showed up. Starting imperfectly right now with whatever is available is not the reckless choice. It is the most rational one, because the cost of waiting is not neutral. It is real, measurable, and permanent. Here is what ties all 7 of these together. None of them feel like financial mistakes while they are happening. That is the point. That is why they persist. They are invisible not because they are complicated, but because they are ordinary. Because everyone around you is doing some version of them. Because the culture has made them feel like the default. The defaults are not decisions. They are just what happens when no one is paying attention. The moment you start paying attention, everything changes. Not because the behaviors automatically stop, but because you can finally see them clearly enough to choose differently. That is how it begins. Not with more income, not with better timing, not with a dramatic turning point, with awareness, then with a decision, then with the next one. Start there.